This is Writer Life, a podcast about writing, life, coffee and conversation with Rob and John Morgan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Writer Life. The title of today's episode is Inspired Women, and what I want to do is I want to look at a few things that I've read recently, and I just want to pull them apart and have a look, and I just take a look at the female characters in literature and to a degree in film, because there are times when I read media posts from actually within the book industry, and I cannot deny it, I do feel a little bit confused, especially when it comes to the roles of female characters within literature. Now, it appears to be a bit of a modern day phenomenon, as the media suggests that there are just not enough female role models and heroines within today's books. So this also leads me to question, should every writer be doing their bit to, inspire young women? And do we need to do more? And why are women no longer inspired by what they read? I find all of this somewhat difficult to digest, and I cannot help but question, would it not be far better an example to be inspired by maybe a real life living heroine? But there does seem to have been a trend over the last few years, especially in film. We've seen a complete remake of the film The Ghostbusters, which was made with an all-female cast, because, it was touted that the females don't get enough good roles. There's been talk of a female Iron Man, or in this case it would be an Iron Woman. And even, because of the problems with Johnny Depp and Amber, there was talk of replacing Johnny with a female pirate instead. So this begs me to kind of question a little bit, because it does seem a little bit disingenuous to me, because Captain Jack Black, or Jack Sparrow I should say, is loved and adored by millions of women, as is the character Iron Man. So if we replace them with female roles, are we not literally going to affect all those women that absolutely love these, what are now franchise movies, and take away their viewing pleasure? Or would the same women be equally as excited about a movie that contained a female in the lead role? It all seems a little bit complicated and confusing, and I really don't know what to make of all of this. There's a part of me that has to question, is this just like the book industry or the film industry? Do we really have so little that we can't find other ways to admire and idolize women as heroines? I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of women in the world who've done amazing things, and they've shown great bravery in the roles that they have. How many women have worked hard to build up their careers in the corporate world and, have achieved, what has always been considered the hardest nut to crack, and yet they've been very successful and they've made it? What about female soldiers? If you look at countries like Israel, they have an amazing array of incredibly capable combat soldiers who are women. What about surgeons? Female surgeons who've worked their way up and have achieved this almost celebrity status within the health industry for their absolute skills, with their ability to, open people up and work at an alarmingly fast, steady pace to help heal people. I mean, that's something that's really admirable. I would imagine any surgeon, it doesn't matter whether male or female, I mean, that is an amazing role, and it deserves respect. And maybe, young women should look to them, because, I mean, they're admirable people. And what about politicians? Politics is particularly, or always has been really, a very male-dominated area. And yet there's some amazing women who have fought their way through and have become, Margaret Thatcher is probably the best example, who is one of the most respected prime ministers, whether you love her or hate her. She has an amazing reputation within British politics. She changed Britain as we know it. So at one time, these jobs were like seen as impossible, and yet today they're an actual reality as more and more women see, success, which the women of my youth, which they just never thought was possible. You look at medicine, law, education, and to a degree writing, they've seen women rise up to the highest levels. Are they not really the modern heroines of our age? I mean, why do they have to be fictional characters to be inspirational? I hate to point out the obvious, but case in point, love her or hate her, J.K. Rowling is probably one of the most successful writers of our age. I mean, the woman is literally top of the charts in all writing. She's beaten the men completely hands down. She is an admirable character. What she has achieved with her writing and her ability to take her writing from the pages and put them on the screen is an absolutely phenomenal feat. Now, I'm not one really to judge, but I find my own experience of books and writing to show quite a different story. I mean, just to name a few, I would instantly suggest Lyra from the Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman. I mean, and what about Hermione? And, I might add, Molly and Ginny Weasley from the Harry Potter stories. Most certainly, they come to mind. In fact, I'd probably go even further and say just from the Harry Potter stories alone, there's a great deal of young women to admire. Even, dare I say, Bellatrix, who, although on the side of evil, she is most certainly a woman who has absolutely no problems getting the job done and showing her grit and determination. I've done a lot of thinking on this subject, and I do wonder at times, being a male writer, what is it exactly that young women want from a leading character to actually inspire them? Now, I cannot claim to be that aware, although from my point of view and from personal experiences, I've always noted the qualities of grit and determination within the female characters that I have read in the past. And there are many, many women I've met in real life who have those kind of qualities, my wife being one of them. And I think that has played a naturally important role in the characters that I put together in the books, say, Heirs to the Kingdom, or the story arc that runs parallel to Kingdom. And definitely, there's no doubt, within the Curio Chronicles. I mean, just look at the Curio Chronicles and take Chloe, for example. She may not be the most savoury character to some, but she knows her own mind. She lives on her own terms and does not really care what other people think or say about her. Because, from her point of view, she's living the life that she wants, and she allows no one to dictate the terms and conditions of it. In the books, she's a vital part of Abigail's life, and she's also there to stand by her side and offer all of her support to Abby. You could not ask really for a better friend, and most certainly she's got a huge heart filled with love for those around her who she really does care about. Now, as most writers do today, we often get asked about our work and the people that we create. And I always get asked who is the central, most important character within the stories that I write. And to be really honest, it's not really a very, very easy question to answer. In Heirs of the Kingdom, Lord Locksley is probably the central figure within all of the books. I mean, after all, he's the one who is leading the fight to defend the woodland peoples. But the answer is really just not that simple. I mean, for instance, how can I point at Robbie without also including Runestone, or Jane, or even Jet for that matter? Would my hero be doing as well as he actually is if it was not for the bravery of Sapphire, who threw herself into a fast-flowing river, risking her own life in Book 2? Although, would he also be doing as well if it was not for the power of Violet that's wielded by Runestone, his wife? Would his home be as safe as it is if it was not for the grim determination of the quiet and at times quite isolated Trine. I mean, after all, she was the one who filled the shoes of Scarlet and stood alone on her platform, directing the battle with absolutely great skill. Her only aide being the shy and nervous young Claire, the little flag girl, who stood beside her as the arrows of the enemy rained out from the sky towards them. Now, like all readers, I too have my heroines from the books that I read, and I hope in a way it shows in the stories that I write. I'm particularly fond of Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird, because, even though she's only young, I really admired her grit and determination, and even her stubbornness to get all of the answers to all of the questions that she was asking. And what about people like Josella Playton from Day of the Triffids? She more than shows the courage and strength of women in what actually was, or is a classical piece of literature from the late 1950s, which, for its time, that was a role that women could only actually dream of. And yet in the book, she's living it, she's experiencing it, and she's there in the middle of it all. I also think, to be honest, to a degree, Luna Lovegood is an extraordinary character in the Harry Potter tales. I mean, okay, she does not wield an axe or batter a troll, but she exhibits a very quiet determination that I feel should inspire any young woman of today. Personally, I feel there was not enough of her in the books. I really would love to have read more about Luna. I will also add that I'm sorry, but in my mind, Ginny Weasley would have not sat idly by while Harry faced so much danger in the last book. I honestly feel that Ginny should have been at his side. She was without doubt one of the bravest members of Dumbledore's army. I really feel she should have had a much more active role in the final part of the story. I'm quite sure, having read the earlier books, if she'd actually been asked, she would have made it absolutely clear she was never going to leave Harry's side, and she would have been there fighting with him. When it comes to bravery, what about Lyra Silvertongue from the Dark Material stories? She shows immense bravery as she avoids the evil grip of her mother and fights to find and rejoin her father. I mean, the girl confronts an armoured bear face to face to negotiate for a fair fight for her friend Irek. Now tell me that shows no courage. All of these have served in one form or another to influence the way that I personally see women in books. And so I can only assume other women see them with, a similar view. And I think they've had quite a dramatic impact on actually the books that I write and how I put my stories together and portray the female characters within it. If you ask the question, can women fight? I would say hell yeah, they really can. I've seen some pretty scary stuff in my own life from the smallest of women. I mean, where do you think I get Jet and Blades from for Heiress to the Kingdom? Jet Amber is possibly one of the most aggressive characters in the Heiress to the Kingdom series. Not only is she trained by an incredibly formidable woman who was her mother Scarlet, Jet, although only slender, has the aggression, skill and coolness of mind to fight just about any of the specialists and win. I mean, if you think about the fourth book and Ivor Walters, Jet was overcome with grief at the loss of her sister and mother. She'd not had any sleep at all, and yet when she was faced with the man who plotted their deaths, a man who I may add had exceptional skills with the sword, she dug deep down within herself to overcome her fears, and she fought him to his death. Not unlike, I may add, Éowyn, as she defended her father's crushed body on the fields before Gondor in Lord of the Rings. And if you need more, well, let's not forget Little Blades, as she prances like a deadly cat armed with just her two swords as she twists and weaves through the enemy with cold and deadly surgical precision. I really cannot understand why the critics think there's a lack of role models for women. Maybe they want less aggressive women, but even if you look at it that way, I would say there's no small amount of them in literature. If you really want true grit and stamina, well, just look at Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. I mean, she's not a fighter with a weapon. But hell, what a woman of intellect and words. She single-handedly stood against every aspect of the social convention of her time to state her terms and live as she fully intended. I mean, that's an admirable quality. I would even add that if you look to what is possibly one of the most compelling modern classics of our time, which is Game of Thrones, there's no shortage by far of immensely powerful women, Cersei Lannister being my first choice. Is there anything that woman will not overcome? And hell, what about Arya Stark, or even her sister Sansa? If you actually look at what they've endured, which has, they have to be a real beacon to the willpower and determination of any woman that is living today. From my own collection of work, at this point I really do have to point out what is probably the most obvious character, who's going to be Bev from the Curio Chronicles. Now, she may not appear to be the ideal, perfect, petite and feminine female that we may find in Hollywood, but hell, that girl knows how to deal with life and just about any situation that is thrown her way. If you read Abigail Summer, you'll probably read the following. Bev took a great liking to Anthony. She hugged him tight, which almost crushed him. I got your back, bro, have no fear. It was sort of cute. He was like a little doll compared to her, but she could be as fierce as a Rottweiler, and I knew he would come to no harm in her care. My point was proven a little while later when he suddenly was surrounded by 4 big guys as they laughed at him. Bev appeared with a burger, stepped into the ring, handed a burger to Anthony, and sized up the biggest. He sneered at her, and suddenly, BAM! She headbutted him, and he went down like a sack of carrots and lay on the ground out cold. Anthony just gasped with shock. Bev stared at the other 3 as they looked at their friend on the floor. Do we still have a problem? The next tallest looked at her and shook his head. Fuck, no. They turned and fled, leaving their friend out cold on the floor. Bev took her burger back and winked to Anthony. He gave a terrified, sheepish smile. Now, Bev may not be the most elegant character. I mean, it's certainly not the most elegant of ways to be female. But who says that women always need to be weak and vulnerable? Women are capable of so much more than these critics give them credit for. And yet, they appear to have lost sight of how amazing role models actually exist today. So, I've got to ask the question, where is this lack of female role models? Because I, for one, would love to know. Now, maybe the critics are reading the wrong books. I know from my daily reading of most of the industry publications, there's no shortage of female writers. And I personally feel that there is definitely no lack of strong female characters. Case in point, read The Hunger Games. I love nothing more than to read of women equaling the efforts of men. Personally, I really enjoy reading and writing both sexes as they actually work together and interact as complete equals, something I feel is very, very well represented in my own work. My own work currently has a readership of 52% women and 48% of men. I try to talk to my readers whenever I can to gauge their opinions, and to date I've found that both sexes fully enjoy my work equally as much, So I have to conclude that today I have served my purpose and done my bit to promote true equality. Now, I must admit that when I'm actually writing these sorts of issues, the kind of like, am I being sexist? Am I being misogynistic? Which are pretty popular words that are used in today's rhetoric. These questions just don't come to mind. I can honestly say that after writing 15 books, I've never once sat down to sort out the actual diversity of everything, because I simply write what feels natural. And I actually do believe that it's the only way a writer should put their words on paper. We all get bashed from time to time, and I've certainly had my fair share of comments aimed at me for some of the things that I've written. But I still feel that once a writer has created a character, they must actually allow that particular character to evolve naturally. In my own cases, I feel that they have done. And luckily, both sexes have had their fair share of praise and the glory. When I write a female character, or any character for that matter, I place them in a situation and I look at how I built this character up and how they've evolved. But then I simply ask the question, well, how are they going to deal with this? And then I write what is a suitable response to the personality that I've created. Now, I realise that we now live in a society of utter political correctness. And yes, we should all encourage a fair and tolerant range of views and characterisations. But I also think that, left alone to their own devices, writers will always very naturally show the whole range of diversity within their work. Never ever forget that for a serious writer, watching the world is something we pretty much do all of the time. Every experience and observation is food for our work. And so I feel if you sit back and look at the massive amount of diversity across all of literature, both past and present, everything and everyone is given a voice and a platform within all of the given works. Maybe we just need to see the bigger picture. Maybe we need to just stop analysing everything. And especially the critics. After all, we all choose to read what appeals to us. And so it's within the best interests of all writers to write what is naturally appealing to most people. I think, having considered this issue, I feel that I've got to ask what I think is an important question. Do the critics who express this lack of female heroines say so due to a lack of female lead characters, or just a lack of inspiring female characters in general? Because, I must admit at this point, I would look at Harry Potter, possibly one of the most influential books of our current time. And yeah, Hermione is the lead character. But, so are Ginny and Luna. They are without doubt some of the most important characters in that story. And they certainly are, in my opinion, inspiring characters for any young woman. But they're somewhat of a background character. I can say the same for many of my own characters, although I have, across both of the series that I've written, I've brought my ladies to the fore to be featured in one specific book or one specific aspect of the story or another, for the series. They are by large background characters, albeit Runestone, Abigail and Birch, who are without doubt lead characters, sharing the limelight with their counterparts. I'm not convinced that an influential character has to be the lead of the story, in which case today's critics need to really reevaluate their stance. Obviously, this is only my own opinion. I can understand that. But I feel it does hold some validity. Jade Opal in my own stories is possibly one of the 4 most important characters of Heir to the Kingdom. she is in all of the books in a prominent position beside her sister Runestone. And I must admit, she's still the most popular of all of my female characters. But she's not the lead of the books. Many of the female fans I speak to identify with Jade, which I feel speaks volumes from my point of view of the character. Although I would love my female readers just to let me know if they still agree with that. Now, on a different note, I feel Branna, and possibly also Morgana, from the story arc that surrounds the Kingdom, are very inspiring women. Branna fights for what she believes in against the might of a very, very powerful queen. To a degree, she lives as an outcast, and yet she fights her way out of a very difficult situation by outwitting people, and then thrives in the wild as she runs from the queen. Branna's highly intelligent, and she uses that intelligence to literally overcome her issues and outsmart everyone, who means to do harm to her. She sets the boundaries and the rules of her own relationship with Berengar, and builds and controls her own small empire. Branna's fully aware of those plotting against her, but she silences them with a show of her full powers. So much so, they step back and threaten her no more, because they fear her. Morgana in the Countess of Darkness shows immense willpower and bravery, because she's aware that the Queen is out to get her and possibly kill her. But she does not back down, and she confronts the Queen face to face, which does actually win her a great deal of respect from the Queen's subjects. She's a young female living alone in a realm ruled by a queen who hates her. She grows her own food, chops her own logs, and makes her own clothing, and lives a free and independent life. She's not afraid to stand her ground and speak up for herself. And I'm sure there are many women out there who would agree she lives a life to really inspire other people. There's so much out there to read and learn from, and all of it has helped me in the stories that I put together, because not only are these characters inspirations for women, they also inspire men like myself to work hard and try to write better representations that our readers can identify with. I've written so many different kinds of female role within my books, which some are based on other stories who, have been a major influence on me, and some are based on very, very real life examples. Emily from Hans Cottage is yet another example of how, whilst hurt and very fragile, she still has the power to endure whatever she faces, and she does it whilst filled with love and care. She's a great example of a very quite ordinary average female doing her best to get through difficult times, and it's within that part of her story she shows the true depth of courage of who she really is. Her depth as a character and a person is infinite, and I feel other women could really identify with her and understand why she battles her way through grief towards a newfound joy. I really am quite uncertain as to why there is this belief that women lack inspirational characters. There are so many if you look hard enough, and not only in books, they're also in film and TV. In my younger days, I had women such as Linda Carter, who played the first Wonder Woman, or Helen Slater, who was Supergirl. Back in the 70s, we had Jamie Summers, the $6 Million Woman. I particularly like Batgirl and Catwoman. And in today's books, comics and films, they're all filled with superhero females, all of which have characteristics that I feel would just about thrill any young woman and certainly get their imaginations fired up. I'd even say that if you look at British actresses, Keira Knightley is an amazing role model, not just for films like Bend It Like Beckham or even Domino, but also the way that she's actually lived her own personal life, being very true to herself. These surely are the sorts of things we should show our young women in hope that it continues to inspire them, lead the way into the futures of books and films. I think, having really looked at this issue, I must admit I've shown a little complacency, because I certainly find that I may be amiss in my approach to selling Heirs to the Kingdom or even the Curio Chronicles. I have to admit I've always put the books out there and just allowed those who feel it would be something that they may enjoy to choose. But maybe I should be applying a lot more marketing to young female readers. Maybe that my books have the inspirational characters that they want to read, according to these critics. It's certainly something that up until now I've not really considered. Maybe it's time I looked at that and changed my approach to how I present each of my books in the future. I really do feel that in today's modern era, women have no reason to feel that they're not represented within literature or even media. I'm not convinced the critics are right, because if women really do seek a character to inspire them, all they need to do really is just lift one of the many books available today, and I'm quite convinced that between the pages they'll find a female character who will absolutely inspire them to live better and true to themselves. If you agree or disagree, put a comment in the comment section below and let me have a look at it. If you've not subscribed to the channel, please do, and give the video a like. That way I can get my words out to a much wider audience. This is a really small channel, but you know, I'm chipping away, trying to build it up. And a subscribing to the channel really would help me. I like to look at things and I like to pull things apart, and as I've done today, you know, I disagree with the critics, and so I've pulled their arguments apart and had a really good look, and as a result I've come up with something that's interesting and worth saying or worth discussing and debating. And I hope that, having heard today, you'll go away and look in your own books and see if the critics are right. Is there a lack of inspirational females? I'm not convinced. I'll be back next week with another episode. This one's a little bit shorter than normal, but I wanted to get it said and I wanted to get it out there and just let you all ponder over it. And so, yeah, that's probably going to be a longer episode next week. You never know. So hopefully I'll make you think and make you want to read a book, because that's the true goal of what a writer does. We want you to read. We need more people to read. So get out there, find a great character, and then let all your friends know, and get them all reading as well. I shall see you next week, so goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Writer Life podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, or there are areas of Robin's stories you would like him to discuss, please add your thoughts and questions in the comments, and we will include them in a future episode. You can follow Robin on all his social media links, which you will find listed below, and please, like and subscribe to this channel, so you get the latest notifications when he posts. All Robin's books are available in digital and print formats to purchase or download through all online book sales sites.